Okay, so we are officially almost live. I'm going to stare at my computer for like 2 minutes while I wait for Instagram to respond. And it looks like we're live there. Hello, people in the future. I'm sorry, just like fast forward through all this. I'm Vivi Henriette of Art of the Zodiac, and I'm here with Jake B. Jake B, because I can't pronounce your last name.
Great. That's exactly why I go by Jake B.
I love it. You told me that, and I was like, okay, it's Jake B. Artist, writer, tarot reader, one of my favorite people, et cetera, et cetera. We did a wonderful interview on Substack, which everyone can, go over, listen to, read, 2 separate interviews. So that's your intro. How's that?
That's great. I'm also a huge slut. No, I'm kidding. Now we are live, and I'm already.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding?
Well, I'll let the stars decide. I wait spend 30 seconds and I'm already embarrassing you.
No, I love it. I'm like, me too. I'm like, this is fun. This is the conversation we've been waiting for. Speaking of, I don't know why. I was like, is this the slutty moon? It's in Taurus. Mars is in Leo. I didn't have that prepared. I just think, okay, that's a big juicy vibe. Hanging out with Uranus, anything could happen.
Yeah. Big juicy vibe is my gender identity. And when your Venus is in Gemini, every moon is a slut moon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Your Venus is in Gemini. With my moon in Gemini. Yeah. That's why we like each other. We just want everything at once.
Yes.
In all, right? The sluttiness just like goes to all areas of life. Yes. I don't know about you. I'm like a person slut, a book slut, all of it.
Yes, I'm an aesthetic slut for sure, which is anyone that sees me out and about in Baltimore knows like I go really hard on a variety of aesthetics, but I am committed to none of them. And I think that's true of probably everything related to sex, beauty, and art in my life.
Oh, I love that. This is the conversation we're channeling. So what we're doing is we're really channeling the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening? By the way, hello, people who have joined us on IG, including Stars in Alignment, aka Vivian, who I love, and I owe you a text. Feel free to pop on over. If you join us on YouTube, you can you can comment on Instagram too, but if you join us on YouTube, it might be easier to comment. I don't know, just putting it out there for people. Okay. Should we start with a card? Should we just jump into it?
Yes, totally. So let's just channel a little bit of just baseline wisdom about this coming full moon, about this moon cycle writ large. Okay, I like this. Knave of Pentacles. Speaking of slut, oh wait, for the algorithm, let me cover the breasts. I'm reading from Tarot del Fuego, by the way, for people who are into knowing what the deck is. So Knave of Pentacles, I will say in this deck, the knaves are particularly vibey and pleased with themselves, which I think could be a helpful energy to channel for this particular full moon. So Knave of Pentacles, I think, is really feeling their oats in terms of material comfort, which to me is very Taurus in the first place, especially very moon in Taurus. So I think it's about finding comfort in material right now and finding joy in the physical world. I think that's a big part of things. And there is a naivety to the knaves. So I think allowing yourself to have a naive connection to physical comfort right now is a really helpful choice on this moon cycle, maybe.
Oh, I like this idea of the intentional naivete. Mm-hmm. Naivete. I feel like naivety. That sounds like such a weird word. How do you pronounce this?
Both. A lot of people say naivety is okay. Naivete is also okay. Okay. That was a non-answer.
That is a non-answer.
That was a yes and to everything you said. You're like, is it this or is it this? And I'm like, yes.
Yes, yes. Well, okay, regardless of how we pronounce things, because you're not telling me. It's like talking to a sphinx over here. Like, I don't know. They speak in riddles. This is about as good as we're getting from the Oracle. I like this idea of like this sort of like, oh, we're like in the delusion of material
Mhm.
comfort, but we're really
Yes.
aware of the delusion, which is it's nice. Like sometimes you need to get lost in material delusion, but be well
Mhm.
aware of it because most of us are having a sad
Yeah.
week. Hello, Devin. Good morning. Lovely to see you too. Good evening. I said good morning. Where am I? Where am I? Although it's interesting, you keep saying like when I'm thinking about the material comforts, I keep thinking about this full moon and Uranus being like right there and just being like, but what's going to be disrupted?
Uh-huh.
That's my question. Ooh, is that a question for the tarot?
I was gonna say, what indeed is going to be
What is, yeah.
disrupted? Um, and I'm kind of not reading reversals, but for what it's worth, I would have pulled Knave of Pentacles reverse. This I would have pulled upright. So Six of Cups, I feel like is one of those ones that varies so much by the deck.
Yeah.
But for me, but for this one, when I think of Six of Cups in general, I think about like relationships and balance in relationships. So
Mm,
traditionally, when I think of this card, I think it comes up when like uh, the balance of what you're putting into relationships and what you're receiving, especially emotionally, really comes into focus, which I don't know how this connects necessarily to the astrology of this particular moon, but I think like if there's an area of disruption that we're looking at right now, at least according to the tarot, I think it would be in that kind of balance in relationships, especially the give and take of relationships. There can be a sense of it's like the opposite of despondency. It's like looking off into the distance at what you could have in your relationships, in your love, in your life, in the people around you, instead
yeah.
of sort of like investing in what's in front of you. But this comes from a place, I think, of like giving a lot emotionally and not being entirely sure like what's yielding back to you.
Ooh, could we also add to that? I think that when I think of the Six of Cups, and just by the way, like a sort of side note to all of this, I really love that we have because there's a lot of people who do very I can do very serious astrology, but I think there's something really fun about, right, like creating space for the tarot to see what comes up and have conversation as opposed to like giving straight delineations of like, this is the full moon, this is what to deal with it. So I love that we're kind of like sort of straying away from, I guess, straying away from the astrology, if you will. But coming back to this, the Six of Cups, I always think about there's a certain level of nostalgia with that card. And I think I
Mm.
got from like T. Susan Chang thinking about because in the Rider Waite Smith deck, isn't it the two children? Am I getting this right? Are you familiar?
I can tell you the answer. I
Tony
will
Chernus?
ask the oracle.
Can we ask
Um,
the Google Oracle?
yeah, yeah. The
Okay.
Gemini. Isn't it insane that they've named? Yes, it is two little kids, and one
Yeah.
is handing
Yeah.
a cup to another.
Take this diversion because we are Gemini people here. So we're gonna pause the Six of Cups, and you said, "Isn't it wild?"
Oh, that the Google AI is called Gemini. In a very Gemini way, I like let go of the thought completely when I answered what I was looking for. Yeah, it's wild that Google AI is called Gemini to me. I'm like,
It's
it's an interesting name for an oracle because I don't think of us Geminis as like the iconic bringers of clarity.
well, I mean, this actually makes total sense, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's like it's like the Google AI. It doesn't bring clarity. It just
Mm.
literally just it's literally the most Gemini thing. It just pulls from like the ether to get random facts, right? Like it's just all of it at once. It is not a clarifying tool, just like Gemini. We are not clarifying tools over here.
Yeah, just a tool on my end. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, back to the Six of Cups. Okay, so we're thinking about what is this full moon disrupting? And we pulled the Six of Cups, and you're thinking, okay, maybe there's relationship stuff, balance in relationships, and I'm going to add to that. if we think about it as a card of nostalgia, right? Like thinking about the past in a sort of idyllic way, you could say, and thinking about maybe there's, I mean, this totally makes sense, right? Like there's a disruption to the nostalgia, right? Which is, what is a disruption to maybe nostalgia? A reality check.
Yeah.
So there's both this sort of like, we're getting this idea of like, okay, it's okay maybe to get lost in material comfort, but also be aware at the same time. We're going to be reminded that of the reality that is.
Yeah, and is this reflected in the astrology right now? Because what you're saying about nostalgia is like resonating on a very personal level. Just about like a disruption in like times or spaces that feel very nostalgic, and now there's like a disruption of like, okay, well, actually maybe this was always a lie. And I'm not just talking about obviously the American electoral system. I don't think anyone has like great nostalgia about about any of that. But yeah, is there something in the astrology around nostalgia right now, or like disruption of nostalgia, or like things coming back from the past that maybe weren't what they seemed to be, or not as rosy as they seemed to be at the time?
Ooh, okay. So I'm thinking two things, right? Right. Like on one hand, maybe tangentially, we get there in two ways. So we think that there's, so the full moon in Taurus means that the sun is in Scorpio, right? So we can have a conversation about what the Scorpio-Taurus opposition looks like. And I'll sort of put that on pause for a moment. And then we think that Saturn is the sort of weight, the keeper of time of old things is in Pisces, making a trine to the sun, right? And so already, I think there's a certain sort of nostalgia built into that, right? Like there's maybe say an emotional weight with the two of these. But then thinking about Venus being, I don't know, Venus in Capricorn feels a little bit about like reality check Venus. And of course, Venus is ruling the moon. So she's having a conversation this full moon. And I guess just like knee-jerk reaction is there's something about like Venus in Capricorn feels very broken nostalgia to me, right? Because Venus wants to, like, just as you said, like indulge in things that look good, taste good, smell good, right? And there's a certain sort of, maybe not always like straightforward nostalgia, but there's a sense of like the ideal within that. And in Capricorn, there's this harsh sense of like, oh, but I have bills to pay, but like I really want to like, you know, sit around and eat chocolate, but I only have like cacao dust to deal with or something. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. So yeah, like Capricorn, I think of as having so much this like very practical energy, like this almost like, if we think about the time of Capricorn in at least the northern hemisphere, it's like we're going into the lean months now, and like Christmas is over and we have all this credit card debt or whatever, you know, like that's like my mnemonic for Capricorn practicality is like, yeah, it's New Year's Eve and you realize how much money you spent on stupid shit in the last few weeks. But in the realm of Venus, yeah, no, this is interesting to me because Venus, you're saying Venus is presiding over this moon because it rules Taurus, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so she wants to deliver, like, Venus always wants to deliver the goods, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I love that we opened with like, we are calling in Venus with our slutty intro, literally. And, right, Venus just wants to make everyone comfortable and indulge in all of it. But then she's in Capricorn and it's like, right. Anyway, for Capricorn. Venus in Capricorn is a very beautiful placement. So if you're listening to this, you're like gawking me. This is not a reflection on anyone's nativity.
Venus in Capricorn is maybe get your blood work done if you've been a big slut lately. Reminder for me. No, I'm kidding.
Speaking of reality checks,
Yeah, sorry.
And speaking of delusion, Devin's like Neptune and Luna are dancing together a lot today, so which is true. So I love that we're actively maybe calling the delusion with this very disillusioned conversation. By the way, more people, please chat. If you're listening to us and you're still here, feel free to enter the conversation.
Can I ask you, and not to pivot if there's more to say about this, but the thing that I want to hear your opinion about is this Mercury Sagittarius entering shadow situation. This has me. I'm not a traditionally. First of all, I want to hear what your general feelings about Mercury retrograde are, because like I'm personally not to brag, but I have a pretty good relationship to Mercury spiritually. So I feel like retrograde is like very often, besides some of the tech stuff, like not really a problem for me. And even that is like pretty chill. So I'm curious, I guess, your overall thoughts about Mercury retrogrades and also like entering into shadow and Sagittarius here, like what you're feeling about it.
Oh, okay. I love this. We are going to take a do you want to have we'll do the Mercury retrograde interlude, and then we can go back to thinking about the conversation between Taurus and Scorpio, which is like my favorite.
For sure. Do we want to go there first? Is that where you were just about to go?
I don't know. Let's pull a card. Let's pull a card. Yeah. Let's see. So, okay, let's have a few phrases. This is fun. So do we take the interlude to talk about Mercury retrograde? So, right. I think that's the question. So do a yes, no.
Yeah. Okay. I'm bad with yes, nos with tarot.
Let's try it together.
Okay. So, Queen of Swords, to me is like take, in this case, not always, but like take bold but considered action.
Yeah.
With like intellectual practicality in mind. I'm also, besides being bad with yes no tarot, I also teach English, so like it's impossible to get a direct yes or no out of me. I'm like, we can talk about a scenario in which that would be correct. Like I don't know, Queen of Swords, decisive
I think she's yes. I think she's like, yes, just do it. Just cut through, go to this. By the way, yes, so we are going to talk about Mercury retrograde. Also, must scream, no mouth. Interesting. Thank you. Interesting name has joined us. I don't know if you know this person, but they're trying to get us to read their chart, which we don't do here. But thank you for joining us. Do you know this person? I never know who's a troll or who's just actually came on, honestly.
I don't know. I'd have to be looking at their name on Instagram. And I don't want to shatter the illusion that I'm not actually on Instagram right now. But I just did. Reality check. Venus Capricorn. I'm flying blind here. Blindfolded, much like this Queen of Swords, actually.
Okay. I like the card. That's a good one.
Oh yeah, she's a good one. And I guess maybe we start with what the Queen of Swords has to say about Mercury retrograde in general, which like in this particular rendering, which I really love, the Queen of Swords is blindfolded and she's like fighting off these dragons anyway. And in general, with the general meaning of the Queen of Swords, which is about like a sense of intellectual confidence and a sense of like objectivity, I think that something about this coming Mercury retrograde cycle that might be helpful for people is like, you're going to have to be flying blind a lot, and you're going to have to be pretty brave about it and pretty confident in your preparedness. Queen of Swords is like, she can do this in her sleep because she's done it before, and suddenly she actually kind of has to, and that's scary, but she's very sure-footed, and she just can't take a moment to question whether or not she can move forward or whether or not she remembers sort of the choreography, because the moment she does, one of these dragons gets at her. So she just has to like, she's not super intuitive. She's like, no, I trust myself because I've trained and I'm prepared, and I'm smart,
Oh.
and I'm playing chess. Like these dragons are playing chess, like checkers, and I'm playing chess, and I can see the whole board, and I can even close my eyes and see the entire game board and just like make a move. So yeah, I think expect uncertainty, but also like moving confidently through uncertainty over the coming weeks is going to be helpful.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that you just like channeled that delineation. And also I realized my mic was over here. I feel like speaking of like Neptune, I'm like, am I drunk? We like came on late. Like my mic was over here. Like thanks if you're with us. Okay. Not drunk. I don't drink. Okay. Perfect. I love this too, right? Like we're thinking like Queen of Swords, which is a very mercurial card. So your question was what to expect. Okay, I think you wanted to know a little bit about Mercury retrograde period, right? And specifically Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know your general philosophy about
Yeah.
it, just because like I know some astrologers are kind of alarmist about it. I don't know. I want to hear like for some astrologers, I think it's like Mercury retrograde. People make a really big deal out of it, and then some are like, no, we should take it really seriously. So I'm curious about your philosophy on it, and then just what you think is going on with this coming one.
Okay. Well, my general philosophy is I love Mercury retrogrades. Like not in that like, oh, we're going to get like Mercury gifts or something, but so to really understand what a Mercury retrograde is, right? So we know Mercury is the planet of communication, the planet of merchants, right? Like transactions, to a certain extent, technology, right? And when Mercury goes retrograde, right, it slows down and it appears to move backwards in the sky. And so that's one part of it. The other part is that Mercury retrogrades mark a phase change. So Mercury always goes into the retrograde as an evening star and exits on its way. It will exit and then after the stationing become a morning star. Does that make sense to you so far?
Some of it. I'm really into this morning star thing. Taki, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so Mercury and Venus can both either be morning stars or evening stars, right? So a morning star is a star that's visible in the morning.
Okay.
An evening star is a star that's visible in the evening, right? And so in astrology, well, this is interesting. We could say, I'm going to say gender, but they're not like, gendered in maybe the way that we think about it. But every planet is, we say either like male or female, right? Or masculine or feminine, not male or female, masculine or feminine, right? But Mercury is interesting because Mercury can either be masculine or feminine, depending on whether it's an evening star or a morning star. So there's this sort of shapeshifter quality to Mercury, which is really fascinating. And so it's during the retrograde period that Mercury goes from being an evening star. And if you think about like the evening, right? Like night consciousness, something that's more reflective, more intuitive, right? Like think about like what happens at night. There's a sense of literally like feeling in the dark. So Mercury goes from that during this period of, this is what the retrograde marks, to a morning star, which is more of sort of, we say daytime consciousness, right? Which is Mercury taking action, having new ideas, like ultimately like sort of max clarity Mercury, if that makes sense. Okay. So when we think of the retrograde, there's this period in between where Mercury slows down and it says to sort of disappear, right? And so symbolically, mythologically, we could say that Mercury is like, spending time in the underworld, right? Because Mercury, again, in Greek mythology, is the psychopomp Hermes, the one god that could move between the underworld and Mount Olympus, right? So we're getting this sort of we're really starting to understand through this retrograde cycle a little bit about Mercury as a planet. Okay, so Mercury kind of disappears, right? And we could say it's visiting the underworld. And so we could say that Mercury retrogrades can be these times of like pause, right? That's why when people talk about Mercury retrograde, they're like, it's like the right? Rethink, reevaluate, revise, right? So it's almost like we take this time and everything sort of mercurial is put on hold, and we can like it's a time for us to check in with things. How are they doing? Right? Like it's not really a good time to like start new projects. It's really a time to like finish up the old stuff, right? Going from Mercury evening before Mercury, again, morning star, starts a new journey in this phase change. Am I making sense so far?
Totally.
Okay. So when we think about the retrograde, right, oftentimes, like, I don't know, this is a good example. I can't tell you how many times, like, Mercury retrograde, it's like, what is Deb? I think your Mercury RX in Sagittarius is about learning more about Mercury. Oh, I love that. Devin's making a comment. I think your Mercury in retrograde in Sagittarius is learning more about Mercury. That's perfect, right? I'm trying to like condense it all into a thought. And Devin, you know this, so thank you for hanging on because I hope this isn't boring for you. Okay, so the example I use, Mercury retrograde, right? So Mercury retrograde and your car, right? Like I've had so many times where my car breaks down because I needed oil, right? And it's like a reminder, like, oh fuck, I should maybe maintain my car better. Right. So oftentimes things will come up that need addressing, or like, I can't tell you how many times, like, it's classic Mercury retrograde, and tell me if this works for you, it happens to you. I'm sure we're like every X, it's this very Venus retrograde, but definitely Mercury retrograde too. Like everyone you like used to date somehow comes back into your life. Right. Like, by the way, this is like very simple and like textbook, but it's so true. If like, probably don't try to rekindle a relationship during a Mercury retrograde, right? Because it's like as soon as Mercury goes direct, you're going, oh my God, now I know why I broke up with them. Like, not a good idea. So like it's frustrating, but I think Mercury retrogrades, if you sort of get in tune, you can go, oh, like what am I trying to clear out? What am I being told here? Right. It's a really ripe time for, and you said you have a relationship with Mercury. This could be a really potent time to have to connect with Mercury.
Yeah. Interestingly, that's a relationship that needs tending. I just used to burn sandalwood all the time and like have a whole thing. And now like I think about Mercury a lot, which
is your Mercury retrograde. Your Mercury retrograde is rekindling your relationship with Mercury.
Yeah. Also, while you were talking, I pulled the King of Cups, which I think could be a helpful energy around Mercury retrograde as well. And again, I'm going a lot by the depictions. I like the Terra del Fuego because they offer sometimes very challenging, like reframing. And I think something that resonates with the King of Cups exactly in what you're saying in terms of like relationships is like to remember that the king died for a reason and to allow the land to be fertilized as a result of that, which is like pretty far off from how I usually think of King of Cups, which is like a helpful, more connected thing of it for traditional tarot is like King of Cups, very charming, very empathetic, very intuitive, very like reads the room really well and all of that stuff. King of Cups in this card, I think, can be like, no, read the room. The king is dead for a reason.
Where are you getting the also just, I want to like pause to like, I got into this like really heady like explanation of Mercury retrograde, and then you were literally like, but pour some water on it. Right, like calm down, like get embodied. Tell me more about the king being dead.
Yeah. Well, and also like the King of Cups in general. Yeah, there is a lot of like I don't know. Queen of Cups is more like taking care of yourself energy. King of Cups to me is more like tending to relationships around you in a particular way. But as far as like, the king is dead. It's just literally in this card.
Oh, in this card, the king is literally dead.
Yeah, there's literally a dead king. And actually, I'll try to find it at some point if there's time. But the King of Swords in this deck is like a king falling on a sword. So I can't remember the other two kings in this deck, but I think those two particularly have a relationship where it's like, it's just in King of Cups, this idea of like, I think the death of old patriarchs or understandings of patriarchy creating like a sort of lushness. Again, very dark depiction of the King of Cups, who to me is usually like a pretty jovial figure in a lot of ways, almost delusionally so sometimes, or at least like it's like the King of Cups' job a lot of the times is like to keep the light on when the people around him are or them are upset and having trouble. It's like King of Cups I think of often as like this almost annoyingly motivating figure of like, I actually think what you need is this injection of like encouragement and like delusional joviality. But in this depiction of it, I think it's just this idea of like, I don't know, letting old ways die, or like in the realm of heart and feeling with King of Cups, or with Suit of Cups, just like letting old feelings die, maybe. Good and bad emotions, right? It's the stereotypical example of the ex or the rekindlings of relationships. It's like it's either a really good time to like let resentments go, or to let pains go, or it's a really good time to be like, oh, that little flutter in my chest that I feel that enabled me to overlook all these other red flags. Like I need to let that die too, and I need to let that like fertilize the land a little bit.
Oh, okay. I love this. So we can bring this all together now, and I'm even going to bring the Mercury retrograde back into it. So we started this our tarot conversation with what is going to be disrupted on this full moon, right? This full moon in Taurus. And you pulled the 6 of Cups. And so we're starting to get something like relational. And as I mentioned, maybe there's a sense of disruption to nostalgia, right? And then, so it's interesting that we're thinking like, okay, there's some sort of reality check, disruption to nostalgia. And then we make our way now to the King of Cups. And there's sort of this period of like, the king's dead, right? And there's something about like I think of that card maybe in this like context is processing, right? So like processing the death of something and letting the we could even say like let your tears of mourning, right, fertilize something new, right? So now we're starting to bring this together, and then now if we bring it full, we go, okay, what's it mean that, you know, Mercury is slowing down to go retrograde? I think there's this big pause, is like, okay, so maybe now isn't the time to take action or you know, respond to things, we could say. But you know, the Mercury retrograde kind of has this inbuilt, let's step aside, let's try to think about it, right? Let's process it. Because by the time Mercury goes direct, we can then move forward with new information, with new ideas, a new strategy. So what we're starting to get to is some sort of disruption, big moment, and then process.
Yeah.
Did I pull that together well?
I feel good about it. And I have a potentially leading question related to the fire in these little cups and to Sagittarius, which is, do you think that Sagittarius in the mix here brings like some spiciness to all of this? Because these are traditionally cups cards and like soupy feeling cards, but like, do you think with the fire, and it's depicted in this 6 of Cups ironically as well, like, do you think there's like some extra spiciness to some of the Mercury retro stuff maybe?
Oh yeah, I think of and by the way, Devin's here, so like please chime in, give me your thoughts on this too. Devin is an amazing astrologer. Mercury and Sagittarius like totally makes sense right now, right? Like, okay, like Mercury, I always think of like Mercury as like the hustler of the zodiac, and you have to be really clever and not really like Mercury is constantly either trying to like gather information and sort through it, right? That's like Gemini and Virgo. Gather it, make sense of it, right? There's a sense of I want to say Mercury's job is to clarify things, is to understand that there is no one way, right? There's 1,000 ways you can get at something. But Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, right? And I think of Sagittarius as the fiery home of like the quest of Jupiter, of like, what is the truth? What is the one thing that we're trying to get to, right? That's sort of very emotive, right? Like, I feel this in my core that this is like what, you know, what it's all about. And therefore, Mercury in Sag can sometimes be a little preachy, right? It can be a little evangelist, right? Like, no, but this is the truth, very emotive, that fiery sort of passion, right? Which isn't, fire and swords don't always go well together, right? And so we feel Mercury, a very impassioned Mercury and Sag, like this is the way, this is the truth with a capital T. And then it's kind of slowed down and gets cluttered. So does it add spiciness to this? Yeah, because it's definitely not adding clarity. We get like all this stuff into water. It's like I'm feeling, and then I know I'm right. It's definitely not adding clarity.
This is very instructive for me.
Oh, I love it.
I do my little astro homework, and I'm like, hopefully Vivi can get me together about this before. And this is, I'm really feeling this Mercury Sag retrograde scenario. I feel like it makes a lot of sense right now.
Yeah. You're like, this isn't really a good sky to make big decisions or react on your anger. Go figure. Trying to think, where should we go from here? What's our final, what do we want our final question to be?
So before I diverged you with my Mercury questions, you were going to talk a little bit about Uranus. Is that right?
Uranus, and I think I was going to talk a little bit like Taurus, Scorpio, that sort of axis in general.
Yes, yeah.
Right. This is to sort of ground us.
Yeah.
Now that so I think I don't know, I always fall back to this sort of I think it's a great analogy, the sort of mycelium fruiting body analogy for Scorpio Taurus, right? Because there's something about the Scorpionic, it's a fixed water sign, it's ruled by Mars, right? And so I always think of, like, when I think of Scorpio people, they're like, it's like really sensitive but really guarded. It's like the sort of, we think of what the sort of stereotypes of Scorpio, like very secretive. It's like everything that's sort of boiling under the surface, right? I say mycelium because there's this whole network of, like, we could see like instead of a network of very well-functioning, I think mycelium are very well-functioning, I would say, like little intellectual creatures. They're like telling trees how to talk to each other, and they're like, feeding each other, very sort of efficient. We imagine that, but like feelings, right? So I think of like Scorpio is like we're maybe we're talking to the dead, we're exploring our nightmares, I'm a little biased because I always think of like the Scorpios in my life are these very intense people who have these, like, usually these sort of like, they carry a lot of horror stories with them. I mean, this isn't all Scorpios, but just the ones I know, right? Like my father was like a non-vet, and I think of my best friend. Anyways, I just think of, there's this sort of big feelings, and also maybe they end up holding the weight of everyone else's anger, right? Maybe again, I'm sort of painting a sort of emotive picture here, if you will, right? So we get, there's something about very secretive, very like the sort of inner workings. And then Taurus is very above board, right? Like Taurus is like, oh, like the fruiting body of like the health, it's what the mushroom actually looks like, right? It's the things you can look and taste and feel, right? They're sort of tangible things. But of course we know that the fruiting body depends on what's, the quality of the soil and water, right? What feeds it. And so it's interesting to think that whatever comes out in the Taurus full moon, like to reality, is like a kind of like representative of what's actually going on below the surface. That was a very convoluted way of getting there, but I hope it made sense.
No, it made sense to me for sure. Yeah, because it's like a lot of what people don't think about with mushrooms is like the sort of neural network, if you will, underneath them, and like some, mushrooms that look like it's a bunch of mushrooms. They're like all part of one consciousness and they're
Yeah.
connected, but that's like all below the surface. And to add to the Scorpio intensity metaphor, it's like a lot of times mycelia flourish in shit or other kinds of decay, right? And like, but also that's like the wisdom of Scorpio, right? Is like, actually, instead of ignoring like what's in the soil that scares us, understand that it can be like quite nourishing to us if we allow it to be.
Oh, I love that. And actually, now that we're kind of thinking about this, the whole thing about like mushrooms is that, you know, like I'm like talking in big generalizations. So people are mushroom experts, please, like don't get at me. I saw the fucking I saw the Paul Stamets documentary. That's about my level of I've read some articles. That's where I am. But right, I don't know if it's certain types of mushrooms that like people put them in, like they're used to clean up oil spills, because mushrooms like really want to like eat toxic shit and then turn them into beautiful things, right? So it's interesting, like there's that idea that the fruiting body both reflects the quality of what's going on below the surface, but there's something about the process, the communication between the two of it, that it sort of alchemizes, which is really interesting to think about, right? So it actually like can like clean it up.
Yeah, I'm not a mushroom expert either. I've done mushrooms once, so I have achieved enlightenment, but other than that no, that's a really helpful thing about the toxic waste. It's like, yeah, that and like clams, right, are really big on filtering.
Oh, tell me more about clams. I don't know this.
Certain kinds of clams or mollusks in general, I think, are often put into like bays, especially brackish like areas that they are normally compatible with. Oh god, a real science person is going to be like destroying me in the comments. No, not really. I don't think we have a lot of like hard STEM people listening to our astrology live. But yeah, basically, like, I think clams or other kinds of mollusks are often put into like polluted bays to abet in like filtering out a lot of the pollution in those bays as well. Similar to the oil spill vibes. But I think that's what I appreciate about like Scorpio in general, and Scorpio moons especially. It's like, you really can't ignore it's what we talked about this with the eating glass, right? Like the only way to eat glass is to eat glass. Like you can't ignore it. It's there. The only thing to do is like absorb and integrate it. So maybe as we get into Taurus, like what comes to fruition is indicative of like how well we have nourished ourselves on the darkness that was revealed to us in the new moon.
Okay, I love that. I love our synastry. I just feel like I just like threw a bunch of shit at you and you came up with this very sort of eloquent, bite-sized nugget of wisdom that I can't even repeat because I have Mercury in Pisces. Speaking of Mercury and Jupiter placements, I'm going to deviate for 2 minutes. I'm going to read because Devin has some good thoughts coming back to Mercury, and then I'm going to have one final question for you. Sound good? Okay. So Devin says, Sagittarius gives information, meaning, and inspiration. Absolutely. The re of Mercury retrograde might bring new info that changes the meaning of what we think we've been told. Yes. Okay. I love that one. And then, whoops, I wasn't live for a second. I don't understand that one, but we get you. We're here. Great thoughts, Devin. Okay, so my final question from the tarot is, so we're thinking about this idea of Taurus, Scorpio. We've brought in this idea of waste, oil spill. Can we ask the tarot what we need to clean up during this full moon?
Yes, love it.
Okay,
so I pulled 2 cards because I want to add to that question. So for the procrastinators, this one is for the procrastinators, and this one is like really directly to your question about what we need to clean up. So for the procrastinators who have maybe like weathered a version of the new moon where they were unable, or at the time unwilling, to like integrate a lot of the shadow work that was being begged of you. I pulled the Six of Swords, which is it's not just about moving on, it's about moving to calmer shores. So like I guess what this card is getting at is if there's stuff that came up for you around the new moon that at the time you just couldn't process, I think the Six of Swords is maybe saying in this case for you, it's like actually okay to just move on from it and go somewhere else, right? Like, I think if you've had trouble integrating these lessons, I think the Six of Swords is here to say, like, there's just stuff that you can't solve here, and like, you have to make a painful journey forward and just like keep walking. As far as what to clean up with the full moon, Five of Wands. So traditionally, this is also a card about like creative conflict. It's not depicted that way in here, but it's about like creative relationships that involve a lot of healthy disagreement that can sometimes feel like you're really butting heads with the people around you. So if you resonate with more traditional meanings of these cards, clean out relationships in your life or collaborations where you feel like you're butting heads a lot. Or just clean up the way that you're communicating with those people and clean up the habits that you've gotten into, right? Like Five of Wands, I think about as a creative sparring card, where everyone can like argue because they know they're practicing and they're using like blunt instruments, right? In this deck, I mean, geez, this is one of my favorite fives. This is one of my favorite reinterpretations of the Five of Wands, because it's, to me, in this deck, it's about how we're using our creativity as a shield from like the fire and shit of the world around us. So yeah, I think this can be a good thing, right? This can be very instructive to say, like, when you're in times of like great external turmoil, it's like, read the wisdom of like the squirrel or the beaver and like make your little sanctuary and like tend to your little sanctuary. As far as what to clean out here, I think it's like, it's time to be like, girl, if you don't leave your sanctuary and get out of there, like all your shit is gonna go up in flames as well, right? So if you're using, I think, especially creative projects or creative life or relationship to creativity as an escape right now, I think that's maybe like something and like your own like creative projects, right? But also like your relationship to creativity or to creative media and things you're passionate about. Like if you're using that as a shield or a tool of escapism right now, and I'm not just talking about politics, right? I'm talking about other things in your life that feel like a trash fire right now. I think that's what we're being called to address, right? And this little creature can't like put the fire out all by themselves, but there's a way in which like the Six of Wands, like moving on to calmer shores, is a really, I think, like compatible card here. It's like, in a way, these two cards together say like, no, actually sometimes you should just get away. You should stop like boxing yourself into this little like, oh, but I have my books and I have my shows and I have my little projects I'm working on, and be like, no, actually you kind of need to get the fuck out of there in some area of your life. And the longer that you wait and the longer that you kind of create this bubble of like, to bring it back, delusion and nostalgia and all of that kind of stuff, the longer you allow the forest fire to grow around you, and the narrower your escape is going to be. So if some things came up for you at the new moon that were really hard to deal with, do not try to escape from them, but maybe don't try to fix them right now. Maybe just like get out of the scenarios that feel like they're on fire around you.
Okay, I love that. And I'm going to bounce on something that I was thinking too, and Devin pointed out. The Five of Wands is the decan right now where Mars in Leo is at, and Mars is slowing down and will soon go retrograde, right? And so return to this part of the sky. And it's interesting that you said creative conflict, because on one hand, I think of Mars in Leo is like wanting to like cut things with like panache, right? It's like very performative Mars, like sort of, but at the same time, I think there's something about, right, like recognizing the frustration, right? Or recognizing the conflict. So we're like, okay, like what do we need to clean out, right? And I think that to your point, there's something about like, I don't know, maybe clean out our relationship to anger, right? Like I feel there's something really big about both this, again, thinking about that Sagittarius, it's almost like put a pause button on it. Does that make sense? Right.
Yeah.
And because it also talking about like that Six of Swords, I love feeling more of this sort of intellect. It also kind of begs the question of like, why are you doing things? So when we did our new moon video, I think our mantra or our statement was sometimes, in order to eat glass, you just need to eat glass. Go watch the video. It makes more sense. But I think that the Six of Swords is like, to your point, well, and maybe it's like, are you eating glass because you want to prove a point? Because like you creatively want to be interesting, and like the six really bring in the intellect of like, maybe just don't do that right now, right? Like maybe sometimes you just don't eat glass because like you can't integrate it. You literally can't integrate it right now. So maybe like reflect on like, are you cutting things up just to cut things up, or are you causing pain and you know, making these big creative gestures that ultimately cause more harm than good?
Yeah. Wow, drag me through my entire art career. No, I'm just kidding.
Do we have any more? Okay. I like everyone just wants to know when Mercury goes out of retrograde. Everyone, like we haven't even gotten there, people, yet. Didn't you get our beautiful statement about why Mercury retrogrades? For a moment to take a pause and integrate and think about it. Everyone's like, well, when's it over? Oh my God. This has been so much fun.
Yeah.
This is exactly, I don't know anyone. Thank you for joining us, everyone who has. This has been winding and the sort of fun that I needed after a week that just feels, I feel like I couldn't deal with too much heavy astrology right now. How do you feel about it? Same?
Yeah, it's just kind of like, honestly, it's just very like samey. Like all of the astrologers that we're reading about this moment, it's like, ooh, it's just like too real about like what happened and like why. For me, like any of the astrology I've listened to about it, it's like why. Like I was listening to one today of, I won't say who because this is not a paid endorsement, but who was like, oh, I'm actually recording this in like September, and it was like really horrifying shit about like, yeah, and there are things right now about like how we treat women and femmes and queer people, and like they're coming to light in a really crazy way. And I just was like, girl, I can't do it.
Again,
like we
this
know,
is our moment.
we know. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great prediction.
Yeah, for real.
Prediction,
For real.
though. Jeez. Man, with that, I wish you well. I'm like, oh, it's so late here. It's like 7:38, and it's like almost 10 o'clock where you are.
Well, I'm
But
a
you stay up
creature of
late.
the night.
I love that. Do we know, are you a daytime chart or a nighttime chart? I can't remember your chart.
I was born in the morning.
Okay.
I'm
You
a
just wanna
morning
go back to
star.
Oh, you are a morning star.
I am the devil. I am Lucifer Morningstar.
You just stay up all night so you can greet the morning. I love that.
Yeah. Iconically not a morning person, but I was born at like 6:30. That's the last time I've gotten up at 6:30 willingly, is like when I was born.
I love it. I love it so much. Can we do this for the next lunation? This is so much fun.
I'm down. Schedule permitting, I'm totally down.
Okay.
What am I saying? December's really chill for me. Yeah, let's do another one.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for joining us, and I'm gonna do my final plug. Not my final plug at all, but again, I'm Vivi Henriette of Art of the Zodiac. I have a Substack. You can get a membership to my Substack. It's very inexpensive. You get fun things, but you get to, most importantly, and this is free to everybody, read my interviews with people. And I have a really great interview with you, Jacob. I call you Jacob. And I hope that's okay.
I love it.
Yeah. Your interview is fantastic. So if you go to Substack, you can listen to the podcast we recorded together. And then you can also listen to the print interview, which is just really lovely. And we talk all about your book, your collection of short stories, which is still one of my favorite books. And with that, everybody go subscribe, support me, subscribe to my Substack. And with that, what's going on with you, Jake? Jake.
Yeah, at Dream Baby Jake on Instagram. Usually
Yeah.
I'm linked, but I've had non-Mercury retrograde related technical problems. So
Okay.
at Dream Baby Jake, you can snag a copy of Tea Leaves at if it's not at your local bookstore, you can ask them to order it, or whatever. You can get it online. Yeah, I have a few more local shows in Baltimore this year if you're watching from Baltimore, but those are all on my Instagram. The cool thing is I'll be at the Walters Art Museum this Saturday. And then later that night, I have a show with my band Moth Broth at the Compound. So that's the upcoming stuff.
I wish I was in Baltimore. Okay. Oh, next time. I'll get there. You'll get to LA first. But with that, thank you. And if Devin, if you're still with us, thank you so much for joining and sharing all your beautiful knowledge. And have a beautiful night.
Good night.
Bye.